So, welcome, thank you for coming. Shavua Tov to everybody. My name is Daniel Nessim. I'm a professor at Bar University, and I want to share with you some insights on how, from a scientific perspective, we can see a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we can get close to him. The goal of this presentation, I want to make clear a few things. One, the goal is not to incite anybody to be a scientist, chas v'shalom. The purpose in here is to incite you to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everything that we do, and to go to the Bet Midrash, is a good place, and learn. That's number one. Number two, I'll try to speak in a way that everybody can understand, a layman language. Once in a while, for the ones who are more pushy on the science side, I will say maybe a few words like this and this that you may not understand. If you don't understand, no worry, we continue, we move to the next topic, okay? With this premise, let's get started. So first of all, anybody knows what this? Yes. An hour and a half, but you can leave anytime you want, okay? Anybody knows what this? Okay, we'll figure it out at the end. We figured out this and many other things. We'll try to see things about creatures that convert air in water, and creatures that convert blood into milk, an animal that has a light with 100% efficiency, conversion. How many processes are there in the body? Are there more processes in the bodies or grains of sand on earth? Resurrection from the animal world, and also resurrection from human beings. We're going to see a few things like this, and in the sense is there a life after this life for us. So this and more. Ready? So first of all, what's the goal of life? We have a source called the Mesilat Yesharim, beautiful, amazing Musar Sefer written by an Italian Kabbalist. Yes, I specify Italian. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto Zatzal. And he said, the goal of life, we don't have to look so far. People are so confused today. There's no looking far. Adam lo nivra ela leitaneg al Hashem ve'le'anot miziv shechinato, shezeu ha'ta'anug ha'amiti. Man was created only to delight in Hashem and to enjoy the splendor of His presence, for that is the true pleasure. And he says basically all the other pleasures that people think about, like for example for me would be a pizza. Well, it's a nice temporary kind of pleasure, but it's not the true pleasure. The true pleasure is to be close, the vekut, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And let's see what it means. We'll see some examples, hopefully more concrete. But the problem is, he says, there are some obstacles. And he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put some marchikim, some obstacles around there, and especially material desires. And in fact today, this is Parashat Bereshit, but next week in Hashem Parashat Noach, we'll talk about the Mabul. And I think we're invaded, this term, a friend of mine gave it to me, we are invaded by a Mabul Shel Shtut. There's a Mabul Shel Shtut that surrounds us. Baruch Hashem, here we are kind of shielded, but just to give examples, atheism. There's no God. We just came from nothing. No creator, so no reward, no punishment. We can do what we want. Evolution. I have a chavruta, we've learned a lot about abiogenesis, evolution, and so on. A bunch of nonsense from beginning to end, but covered in a levush that makes it that it has an appearance of truth. And unfortunately, if you speak to most scientists, they will tell you that this is Torah emet la'amito. And in fact, it's not true, because when you're looking carefully in detail from a scientific perspective, you see there are too many flaws. The problem is you need to have a very scientific eye to see this, because it's very difficult to go into those details. And if we believe in evolution, we came from the monkey. Who do you think you are? You evolved from the monkey. Remember, if for those who were here last time, I made a kind of a joke. There is little Johnny that goes to Daddy. He said, Daddy, where do we come from? How did we came from here? He said, but Johnny, everybody knows evolution. There was a fish. He flapped his flaps for hundreds of thousands of years. He became a lizard. The lizard became a donkey. The donkey became a monkey, and here we are. Thank you, Daddy, but he's not convinced. So he goes to Mommy. Mommy, where do we come from? Where do you come from? He says, but Johnny, everybody knows. God created Adam and Eve, and they had children, and here we are. He said, Mommy, Daddy told me that we come from the monkey. He said, but Johnny, Daddy talked about his family. Well, I'm talking about mine. So you decide which family you want to belong. And then, of course, the time wasters of the generation. The smartphone, the internet, and we become zombies. Transform. Mamash, you just walk around, you see people are addicted. It's more than a drug. And of course, fake news. One, for example, free porcupine. You know about free porcupine? Well, from the river to the sea, porcupine will be free. You know that, right? Right, so that's one all over the place. There's this. By the way, we want to export porcupines to England, France, Canada, Australia, and other countries that like them very much. So we should do an export of porcupines there. Or other things. You know, you have a 5-year-old girl, Khalila, playing with a truck or with a soldier, a toy soldier, and immediately the mother brings her to the doctor to do an operation to become a monster after that. We live in insane times. And then so at the end of the day, eat, drink, and be merry, because anyway, tomorrow you'll die. So, hefker world. But the Torah gives us an answer, and as always, there is a sur merah and an asetov. The sur merah is put a filter, put a block, put something, a stop to stop this mabul coming into your mind. Rabbi Dor Miller Zatzal said, what is better, to have an encounter with a mama bear who lost her cub, or watch TV for an hour? A mama bear who lost her cub is a very dangerous animal, and there are very serious consequences. He said it's much better to encounter with mama bear, because the garbage that gets into the mind will never come out, but the physical injuries eventually will be healed. That's what he says. I don't know if I would like to meet the mama bear, but just to make the sense. But this is not the purpose of today. We're going to focus on the asetov. That's what I want that we focus today. And there are I think there are two ways, the asetov, to overcome this mabul invasion. One of them, obvious, study Torah. Come to the Bet Midrash and learn. I call this the scenic route. You know, sometimes when you're going to go to a certain place for vacation, you can take the scenic route. It takes longer. It's kind of longer usually, but you have amazing sightseeing, and you see, look at the ocean, look at the mountain, look at it's beautiful. And it's a beautiful trip that you can have on the sightseeing. They said, even though Rav Shach, I heard the story that he was on a helicopter, and below there was kind of a canyon or something amazing. Rav, look, please, amazing, it's amazing. He was there with his Gemara, didn't take the eyes off the Gemara. But Rabbi, it's once in a lifetime we see something like this. He says, once in a lifetime I have something like this in Masechet, whatever he was learning at the time. So this is the scenic route, learn Torah. And basically when we learn Torah, we're holding the world. Let's see some examples of where we can see amazing things on the Torah. And of course, as a scientist, I will show you some scientific examples. But you can find things on psychology, things on any other topic. An example, how many stars are there in the sky? That's one question that is a very interesting question. And let's look at science. By the way, when you look with the naked eye, assuming you don't have light streets, and assuming there's no pollution, and assuming you're in a mountain, etc., maximum you can see something like 2,000 stars. So you think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a beracha to Avraham Avinu, you'll be as numerous as stars. If I were Avraham, Mechila HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what kind of a bracha is this? This is less people than on Nachal Lachish here, right? So this is, what kind of a bracha is this? And, well, let's how many stars there are. But he didn't say that, I think, right? So the telescope was invented only in 1608. So before 1608, we could only see some maximum 2,000 stars. Zeu, nachon? And then, of course, the Italians take advantage. In 1609, Galileo Galilei starts looking at the stars, inventing better telescopes. In 1800, which is only 200 years ago or change, we counted only something like less than 50,000 stars. This was French work. Then in the mid-1800s, we went to 320,000 stars, and up to 1950, we had something like 5 million stars. So remember, 50 years ago, we thought there were only maximum 5 million stars. And then came the game changer, the satellites. I remember I was at university in France, and they talked about the Hubble satellite. I didn't understand what was the big fuss about it. But bottom line, the satellites changed everything. Satellite, the Hubble discovered, we can see 10,000 galaxies. Then we sent the Gaia satellites 1.7 billion stars. And then today there is a James Webb satellite. And if you look at the different sources, we cannot count the stars, but we can estimate their number. And their number is between 10 to the 18 to 10 to the 24. 10 to the 18 means it's a 1 followed by 18 zeros, which means it's a billion billions, right? And 10 to the 24 is a million billion billions, okay? So humongous numbers. Now, scientific caveat. First of all, there are scientists, you need to be very careful when they do extrapolations and assumptions. Those are the key things. And evolution, that's exactly where you have to look at. It's like, you know, the lawyers, they do you a contract, and then there's the fine print, font 4 that you cannot look with the telescope, right? And then with the microscope, and then that's where the dangerous stuff is, right? So let's look at the fine print. First of all, we only can estimate the number of stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way, to be 10 to the 11. Okay, that's number one. It's an estimate. Second, we can only estimate the number of galaxies 2 to the power of 10 to 2 times 10 to the power of 12. And it's a second estimate. And when they do a calculation, they basically multiply, and they multiply the number of stars of a galaxy by the number of galaxies, and both are estimates. Because we estimate that all galaxies have the same number of stars as our galaxy, which is a very gross estimation. So, sorry?
Can we see individual stars?
Yeah, but you cannot see the whole thing. How they do, they take, for example, a little solid angle corner, and they count there are 70 million stars in this millimeter square, and they multiply by the solid thing to get an extrapolation. But for example, yes, of galaxies. So bottom line, you have 3 levels of assumptions here that you need to be careful. That's why there is a caveat of which number is this. And then let's look at the Talmud, the Gemara. It was done something like completed in the year 500, which is something like over 1,000 years before the first telescope. So what do you want the Gemara to know about that, right? So if you look at Masechet Berachot 32b, it says, Akadosh Baruch Hu. So the Bnei Israel complained to Akadosh Baruch Hu, you abandoned us, you don't care about us. And Hashem said, look, for you are created this amount of galaxies and this amount of stars for each galaxies and legions and karton and legion and things, And if you take this sugya and you make the calculation in there, you find the number which is 1.0643 10 to the power of 18. So first of all, is in the range of what the scientists estimate today. But second, when you think about this, it's amazing, because the Gemara was written before the first telescope, right? So someone who writes that there are some 10 to the 18 stars in the sky is a meshugana. Can you imagine being in the year 500 and going in the streets, Chevre, I have news for you, science says that there are 10 to the 18 stars. And they say, the guy, let's call immediately the ambulance, put him in, you know, with a white shirt like this. Because it's ridiculous. You can see maximum 2,000. Guy says 10 to the 18. The Gemara knew it before. In fact, interesting story that I heard, Chaim Presby was a scientist at the Bell Lab. He's a scientist, or I don't know if he maybe retired, at the Bell Labs. Bell Labs is also, we have Robert Wilson and Arnold Penzias, who were the discoverers and Nobel Prize winners for the Big Bang, right? They discovered the Big Bang. So Robert Wilson is a Goy, Penzias is a Jew. Chaim Presby, first, when they won the Nobel Prize, he used to go in the car with Wilson before, and Wilson after that, you know, I'm too important, I'm not taking you in the car anymore. But the second thing was, once Presby asked Wilson, tell me, how many stars are there in the sky? And he says, everybody knows, it's 10 to the 18. And Chaim Presby answers, it's exactly 1.0643 10 to the 18. And of course, Wilson said, what? Okay, didn't understand. So anyway, it's an amazing example, but you may say maybe, you know, maybe the Gemara is good for big numbers, but when we come to precision, it's not very good. So let's do something else. Let's look at the duration of the lunar cycle. The lunar cycle, science. Only in the 70s, you know, after allegedly went to the moon in 1969, we put in there some retroreflectors, some mirrors, basically, that reflect light. And with a powerful telescope with a laser, retroreflector on the moon, and atomic clock, you send the laser and you measure, and then you wait for the cycle and you send the laser again and you stop the clock. So you have a precise measure, which is in days. Here is one translation I forgot. Okay, 29.53058 days. Okay, fine. This is, one thing to be careful, of course, in science you always have tolerances on any instrument. You know, the clock, the laser, etc., etc. So you need to take into account that no scientific measure is precise exactly. There are always potential ranges of fluctuation. Please take a seat. There are seats in there. Gemara, as before, year 500. This time we are something like 1,400 years before the retroreflectors and the laser and the atomic clock. and you look at Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah 25a, and it says that Rabban Gamliel says that he received from his father a tradition about how long is the lunar cycle. And when you make the calculation, you find 29.53059414, which is a difference of 0.00002%, which is half a second. Okay, so that's it's not possible to do a measurement like this without instruments or anything. You can do averages of lunar cycles and get maybe you can get 2 digits after the comma, but to have all this, and by the way, we differ only on the digit number 5 is correct, because when you round this, you have a 9 here, but the other 3, the NASA doesn't have, and Raveli Mansour in a shiur on this, he said, well, give them some more years, they will figure out that this is the number, okay? So we can move on. And this was the scenic route, okay? Let's go to the Gemara, but for some people, it may be difficult. So there is a second option, which is the highway. You want to go from A to B, you can take the scenic route, very enjoyable and so on, but takes time, or you can take the highway. The highway is much faster. And the highway is basically look at nature and smell the roses, look and ask yourself questions. And the Chovot HaLevavot, another beautiful sefer of Musar, said that basically the most direct way to gain a clear understanding of Hashem's presence is to examine the wisdom that is evident in His creations. So what I want to do with you today is to see a few examples here and there and see the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in it. So let's say, last time, when we met a year ago, we talked about the 40 orders of magnitude in the universe. When you go to the subatomic particles, to the dimension of the universe, you have something like 40 zero differences between the smallest and the biggest, and this is according to what we know today. So it may be that in a few years, it will even increase. But this is unfathomable. There's no other measure or anything in the world that we can span 40 orders of magnitude. So let's have a few examples. And we saw also last time this famous sentence of Rav Sitkuk, who was the chief rabbi of France. This is the quote in French, original, and this is the translation in English. Nature is the modest veil of protection that God extends over man so as not to force him to believe in God. So Hashem makes in a way, Hashem doesn't want miracles, There was Kriyat Yam Suf, and he said there was a strong wind come. Why do you need a strong wind? Also, the people at MIT can split a swimming pool with powerful fans, so you can think that was something feasible. But it was a miracle, right? In fact, on this topic, Rav Sitkuk says, well, the fact that it opened exactly when we needed it, this is already, he said in French, is a sacré coup de bol. It's a good piece of luck that it happened at this point, right? So anyway, and the examples I want to show you, we'll see this sentence again at the end, because now it can speak to you if you were here last year. If you are not, then it may not speak completely to you. We'll see at the end. Let's see one example. This is technical. So there are materials, the reaction of surfaces with water, okay? Different surfaces interact with water in different ways. There are surfaces that are called super hydrophobic, like the lotus leaf. You try to wet it and it doesn't wet. The water basically rolls down and the leaf remains dry. And this happens because the surface has a lot of tiny sticks. For the technical people, Cassie Baxter if you want. And basically the water remains as a sphere and it just rolls out. We say the contact angle is close to 180 degrees. And on the opposite side, you have superhydrophilic surfaces. So superhydrophilic surfaces are surfaces where basically the water will cover the surface completely. Most surfaces we have are in between. So it rains and you have drops on your wheelchair that have something like a 90-degree contact angle, or whatever it is. But this is a very interesting topic, superhydrophilic, superhydrophobic. So hydrophobic hates water, water remains a sphere. Hydrophilic loves water, attracts water. Clear? So with this, let's look at an interesting creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Namibian desert beetle. A little beetle, and he lives in the Namibian desert. Namibian desert is a very, very dry desert, as all deserts. But once in a while, you have a tiny wind with a tiny, tiny amount of humidity. And what he does, he puts himself like this with his wings, and his wings have areas that are super hydrophilic, meaning that they attract water, and the rest of the surface is super hydrophobic. So what happens is that Oop. Okay. So what happens is that basically on those dots that are super hydrophilic, the water is accumulating until it becomes a big drop. And when it becomes big enough that gravity will make it fall, what happens, it will fall in the mouth of the beetle, and the beetle will drink. Okay, that's what happens with this guy. And in fact, we use that technology to do some screens in areas that are very humid to collect some water, and you'll see in here that we can collect water from the air. So we take the humidity of the air, we put in there. But it's pretty amazing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this beetle in a place that is so inhospitable. There's no way he can find any water, and he can transform the air into water.
What's those parts that collect the water? What's that?
Sorry?
What does he have to collect the water?
He has those dots, super hydrophilic, where the water is attracted and builds until it becomes a heavy drop, and the heavy drop will fall by gravity because he has the wings on vertical position, and they will fall in his mouth.
What part of it is hydroponic?
The hydrophobic, the rest of the wing. It's a bunch of tiny dots, super hydrophilic on a super hydrophobic complete surface of the wing. Okay. Of course, the animal that can convert blood into milk, you know it, it's the cow. And it's a very complicated system where there are some nervous reaction to activate this thing. And the milk, for example, from a cow is 4 to 6% fat content in the milk. But not all animals have the same thing. By the way, I'm not here, unfortunately, to tell you how it works, because really I couldn't understand. But if you're interested, it's a process like this. You have basically the blood comes in and gets transformed into milk, and milk comes out. Voila. Okay? And to my knowledge, there's no scientist that can do anything to transform blood into milk. But what is fascinating here is not only that. By the way, a cow produces on average 45 liters of milk per day. So Rav Buchatzer, I have an idea for you. Instead of buying the milk from the supermarket, if you had a cow in here, then every day you'd have milk for the whole kollel. Now the issue is that it consumes something like 140 liters of water and 60 kilos of grass. So we need to find these. Okay. But anyway, the funny thing is that different animals have different content in their milk. And the milk is tuned exactly for their children. For example, the otter here has a 60% fat in the milk. Why? Because they live in very cold environment, and in very cold environment you need fat to resist from the cold. So it's a completely different thing. I'll show you something this is the one for me is mind-boggling, is the Tamar wallaby. You know, every mother has two breasts. This one is not exception. But the funny thing is the two breasts give two different types of milk. On one breast it gives a milk rich in sugar for the newborns, and the other one rich in protein and fat for the older children. So the new baby comes here and the older baby comes there. And those two chemical factories are different and separate, and one is the milk rich in sugar and the other one is rich in fat. Amazing. Marabu ma'asecha Hashem. Okay. The Rambam says, when you meditate and you look, chokhmah she'en bo ketz, there's no limit. When you look at the creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you see that it's unbelievable. So Tamar wallaby, I don't know if anybody heard of it, but when I saw this, I thought, whoa, unbelievable. Okay, light source with 100% efficiency. I don't know if you realize how problematic the light is. I mean, we had incandescent light that was consuming a lot. When it was in France, I remember we had the how do you call it? Those lights that shoot on the screen, on the ceiling. They're very powerful halogen lamps, beautiful, but they were 500 watts. So those things mamash consume a bunch of electricity. And today we have the LEDs. Why is this important? Because look, when you take your plane in the evening, you look at the lights in there. You see how many lights are there? It's an amazing. If you could invent a light bulb that has a 10% better efficiency, you would become a billionaire. Right? So, in fact, look, incandescent light converted only 5% of the energy in light. And today, when we get to the LEDs, we are close to 50%, passing from the fluorescent to achieve something like 30%. But there's an animal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, the firefly, that converts 100% chemical energy into light. And if you're interested, this is the chemical reaction, very simple. It's a biochemical reaction without generation of heat that converts luciferin and oxygen and catalyzed by luciferase. So if you are interested, this is the formula. Okay, you want to make a fortune? Try to make this. You'll have a light with 100% conversion efficiency. Unbelievable. So let's get to this. What is this? What is this thing? It looks complicated, right? Anybody has a guess? What? You see, there's many things inside. So my guess initially would have been maybe, sometimes you have the map of the metro, the underground, right? And it's kind of complicated. And I looked at the longest one is the one in Beijing. But the one in Beijing looks like this, which looks much simpler than this thing, right? And by the way, okay, I'll tell you later. So I'll tell you what it is. This is metabolic pathways. This is metabolic pathways that happen in our human body. Different kind of reactions that happen in there. So I understand it's not readable. That's why you had the problem. So I'm going to make a magnification of this for you. Now you can understand, right? Okay? Is it clear now? Right? So this is only one possible pathway. There's something like 3,000 to 5,000 known, meaning many we don't know, metabolic reactions in the human metabolism. By the way, this chart, I had a hard time to find it, and I couldn't find a better resolution because it's the old one. Roche is working on a new one. I don't know for how long they've been working, but the new one is not out there. So this is the old one. I don't want to tell you what the new one is. And maybe next year we'll see the new one together. Okay? And these reactions are grouped into hundreds of metabolic pathways like glycolysis, Krebs cycle, beta oxidation, and so on. So sometimes you have one thing that doesn't work. I had a few months ago, lo alenu, I had a kidney stone. I didn't know about kidney stones at all before, but the pain was basically I was bent into two, and of course I go to the terem, the urgency, and here in Israel they're so kind, always, Eifa apnaya, eifa trayavut. So without the trayavut or apnaya, they don't look at you, you can die on the spot. So once I got the apnaya trayavut, they looked at me, and bottom line, what is it? It's one of those 5,000 cycles that didn't work properly, right? So we have all this thing going on all the time, and one of them didn't work. By the way, what is this one? This is another complicated thing. This is a cellular and molecular processes. So we have in the body something like 30,000 billion cells. Okay, and by the way, cells, there are new cells and cells die. And in fact, a very interesting thing, companies are spending billions on anti-aging stuff, right? What is aging is fabulous when you think about this. We are programmed for cells to grow at a certain rate, then stop to grow, and then degrade over a certain time. It's mamash pele when you think about this. It's programmed exactly to have a whole cycle. So we take it as a horrible thing, the aging thing. But when you think about this, is wow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything is programmed, calculated exactly, right? And by the way, we have something like a little more of bacteria. We did not. And in fact, those bacteria, most of them are nice because they're in the gut and they help for the digestion. Without the bacteria, it would be very difficult to digest. And we have, by the way, different types of cells, right? Red blood cells, the neurons, muscle cells, and they're all different. So one thing I saw in a book, amazing. When you think about this, a baby is born inside from one cell. The cell divides and then has to create cells that go for muscles, cells that go for the eye, cells that go for the bone, cells that go for the stomach, and there's a whole process orchestrated exactly, project management. Okay, 2 million cells go in the stomach there, and then others go for the feet, and then one for the nails, and this is for the teeth, and this is, wow, okay. Anyway, and it's impossible to count all the processes, but they say the number of molecular reactions and cellular processes is almost infinite, and there are so many processes that happen at the same time in the cell. Thousands to tens of thousands of biochemical reactions take place every second in each cell. We have 30,000 billion cells times thousands to tens of thousands. Bottom line, multiply that, we have something like more than 10 to the power of 20, one followed by 20 zeros, which is 100 billion billions, right? More than the number of stars in the sky that goes on at any time in the human body. Are there more grains of sand on Earth or processes that go on the body any second? Well, I found as a source that the estimated number of grains, this is a typo, in the sand is something like 7.5 10 to the. So we have more processes going on in the body than grains of sand. This I have to thank Rav Kornfeld, who gave me the tip on this one, and I checked it and he was absolutely right. Let's talk about this guy. Well, it's not me. I don't want to be insulting to anybody. This is Wikipedia. I copied it. And you know, this is the classic picture, but I think the real picture should be this one. And this is what unfortunately, we observe today, right? So the evolution of dumb. I'm not going to redo what I did last year on evolution, but I want just to make a small recap and show you two new examples. So we had one thing. We have to distinguish evolution. There are three things. In fact, there are two things and one that has nothing to do with evolution, but people totally put it in the same cholent of evolution. So evolution is divided in microevolution, macroevolution. Microevolution is exactly what Darwin observed when he made his trip to the Galapagos, and he saw that the finches in the different islands had different beaks adapted to the environment that they had. And this is called microevolution. And microevolution, for example, you see this guy, he looks like a good guy, but I think he's a little overweight and needs some muscles, so we send him to the gym and he becomes like this, right? So if this happens, that's called microevolution. A guy who plays piano for 2 years and then runs a concert is microevolution. A guy who goes to the sun and becomes tanned, it's called microevolution. And in fact, today with epigenetics, we learned even more. The Gemara supports microevolution. The famous story we saw last time about the guy who knocks on the door of Hillel. Where is Hillel? Where is Hillel? Where is Hillel? Right? And he tells him, for example, the Talmud, a certain type of people have the eyes that are very slit like this because there are sands, and so when there are sands, you don't want to have the sand in the eye, and so you squint. Okay? Or you have a big dog and a small dog go together, they have a baby, and it's another type of hybrid, but a dog is a dog is a dog. That's called microevolution. And nobody argues with this. The problem is that Mr. Darwin made an extrapolation. And this is the danger in science. In fact, Rav Gottlieb spoke about the three different mistakes in science. Extrapolation is one of them. Extrapolation is a very big mistake and can be done. So what he did, he said, well, we extrapolate. And then with his cohorts, he came up with this a hypothesis of evolution. There are spaces there. Okay. And so he... So the story, the narrative, the fable is that you had a fish on a pond, the pond started drying out, and the fish started flapping his thing for hundreds of thousands of years, and because of flapping they became leg, and they became leg, and he became a lizard, and the lizard became a whatever, and then the whatever became a donkey, and then a monkey, and then here we are, right? So this is the standard evolution narrative, which when you think Mimma Nafshach doesn't make any sense, either from if it's the transformation is slow like Darwin said, or if you go with punctuated evolution like Stephen Jay Gould said, Mimma Nafshach doesn't make sense. And when you look at, we saw last time something like 15 reasons for contradictions to the hypothesis of evolution. I'm not going to do into this. And so this one, there's too much evidence against, cannot be considered a scientific hypothesis, but unfortunately it takes places in the scientific journals. And irrespective of any criteria that is applied on any other discipline. For example, in medicine, when you want to prove that a vaccine or a medicine is effective, you need specific statistics. Here you just come with the statistics of 1 chance out of 10 to the power of 200, which is much, much more than the number of atoms known in the universe, and the paper is accepted, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the third thing is something that doesn't have any connection with evolution, but they use it in the same context, is abiogenesis, origin of life. There was a famous experiment of Miller and Urey where basically they exploded some gases and they found out an amino acid. And because of that, you see, life is possible. Okay, the story is like saying, I explode a whole country and I found one nail, so I say, yeah, by explosions I can build a car. So this is the equivalent of the thing. It's first of all, it's off topic, and second, we see if someone is interested, we saw in much detail, there's a professor called James Tour, go in there, he gives you the science, very complicated, the chemistry is extremely complicated, he proves to you, there's no chance. But unfortunately, okay, I don't want to say anything. Let's continue. But let's now see a couple of examples, and this is the homework, okay? Chevre, last time we did the theory, now we do the practice. There is, first of all, one guy, in Shemo, I just put his initials, I don't want to encourage anybody to go and buy his books. And this guy says, like many others, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Appearance, don't get wrong, yeah? The beauty of biology is really the illusion of design. This is an illusion. Natural selection and other scientific theories are superior to the God hypothesis, the illusion of intelligent design in explaining the living world and the cosmos. So it's all an illusion. Don't get fooled, guys. Don't get fooled. It's all an illusion. That's what. And one of his friends, Professor Tim Berra, made this. And you'll see this is so funny. So he said, let's take a Corvette. Chevrolet Corvette is a sports car, American sports car, model 1953. And let's compare it with the model of 1963. And then let's compare it to the model of 1968 and the model of 1978 and so on. And he says, and I'll do the professor's voice now. I'll do professor's voice. The descent with modification is overwhelmingly obvious. This is what paleontologists do with fossils. And the evidence is so solid and comprehensive that it cannot be denied by reasonable people. When he said that, his colleagues exploded laughing. Exploded laughing. He says, what kind of an idiot is this? This is called the Berra's blunder. Why is it called the Berra's blunder? Because everybody knows that the Chevrolet Corvette had thousands and thousands of engineers working on every single part. This is the most intelligent design that you can imagine building a car, right? And use it for this. But I think there's a second mistake he made. I thought later, and I found. Anybody sees a second mistake in this? Moshe, you cannot say because you know what I tell. The second mistake is that even if this was correct, this is microevolution. A car is a car is a car. He didn't say that the car became a helicopter or a house. It's a car. Nobody complained. Nobody contradicts microevolution. So the guy, in my opinion, made two blunders. The blunder everybody knows is because he took an intelligent design example to kind of parallel to what he wanted to be not intelligent design evolution. But the second is he took the wrong example. If he had an example of a car becoming a house, then yeah, one we can make. Right, maybe. And so basically, what I would say, he helped us out because basically intelligent design, it's an intelligent design, life is an intelligent design that gives the illusion of an evolution. It's an illusion. And in fact, why Hashem made it like this, I don't know. Because you can find fossils, you can make stories out of it and so on. And Hashem had some sense of humor that we find things and we can make stories out of it. I mean, we have Bechira, right? So in fact, Rav Victor Miller says something amazing. He said, why Darwin came exactly when there was the Industrial Revolution time, which means that the science was getting better and better and better with microscopes and et cetera, because otherwise we would not have any Bechira. If Darwin did not come up with his thing, today everybody would be a Ma'amin. Everybody would be Mamash, you would have to build 6 Mamloes for this if Darwin was not there. But Hashem wants to give us reward. So we need to have something else to have the Bechira back balanced at 50%. Another example. Let's do the eye. Last time we talked about the ear. Let's have a little example of the eye. The eye is an optomechanical electrochemical sensor. Okay? Because you see the light enters inside, projects into the retina, is transformed, the light signal is transformed into an electromechanical signal, goes through the optic nerve, goes to the brain, and we see images. It's lubricated 12 times per minute. The lens has a variable geometry controlled by the ciliary muscles. It's very fascinating because, you know, if you have cameras, you know that when you have grand angle or a zoom, it's just that the lens, you have a different lens. And or you change the distance of the lens from the film. But here you don't change the distance, since this is fixed. It's the geometry of the lens that changes. It's fascinating. It's the lens itself. And can you imagine how many gazillion times the lens has changed? Now I'm looking at you and then I'm looking at him and already it changes the lens, right? And all this, and then on the retina you have 4.5 million cones for 10 million colors, who can distinguish 10 million colors, and 91 million rods for black and white. So a lot of cells in there. And they convert the optical signal into electrochemical signal that goes to the brain. The estimated resolution is 576 megapixels. Just for those who have iPhones, I don't know what the latest iPhone is, but I heard it's something like 45 or something like this. So there's still work to do to reach the resolution of the eye. It sees up to 550 frames per second, and you have 6 synchronized muscles that control the eyes. And why we have 2 eyes? Because we want to see distance. With only one eye, it would be difficult to drive, for example. We see in 3D. And in fact, we see with the brain. So that's one point I want to show you, that the eye is an amazing sensor, but really we see with the brain. I want to show you an example. So before the example, I want to show you a technology that, 2 examples of this. One, they did an experiment with people. They put them glasses that inverted the images. So I would have seen you with the head down and the feet up. And they put the glasses, and those people were very disconcerting. They but they got used to it. They got used to it, and after that, they got used to this, and they could live normally with those glasses. The day they took the glasses off, they couldn't understand what's going on here, and they need to readjust themselves, because now the brain was used to see things upside down. And now that you put them back normal side, they do what. A technology that is amazing, only for blind people, is there is a device like a lollipop that you put in the tongue. And that lollipop is connected to a camera. The camera converts the signal into a bunch of electric signals that are on this lollipop. And the tongue will sense the electrical signals. And by sensing the electrical signal, it can, of course, it needs some training. The blind person can rebuild some images there. I saw videos of blind people that were playing ball with their son, launching and catching the ball, or driving a bicycle with this device. Pretty amazing, okay? But let's do an experiment ourselves. What do you see here? And who knows doesn't say. What do you see? Yeah, you see a couple of people here. You see water. You see a tree, right? Anybody see something else?
Fetus.
Huh?
Fetus.
Oh, you see it. Now, everybody now see the fetus?
What?
Look at the blue. I'm helping you out. Do you see the baby? Now you see the baby? Now that you see the baby, right? Now I trained your mind to see the baby. You see with your brain. You don't see the... So all the optical illusion tricks are all because we see with our brain, and the eyes are just the tool to get the signal to our brain. Pretty amazing, huh? So we would say that the eye is a pretty amazing thing, right? Unbelievable thing. And in fact, Darwin himself wrote that it would be absurd to the highest level to think that the eye, such a complex device, could be the result of evolution. He himself said in his book, but he added, but if we found a series of fossils that went from a simple eye to a complex eye, like the human eye, the human eye is what we call a camera eye. You know what I described to you, but there are simple eyes like insects have, light on off. So no camera, no retina, no things like this. So there are simple eyes. So if you could find fossils, basically you find at the bottom the fossils with the simple eyes and at the top the complex eyes, then you could make a hypothesis of evolution. And in fact, in nature, there are plenty of eyes. There are simple eyes and complex eyes. But the problem is that when you show the fossils, you see them all over the place. You have some complex eyes at the bottom, some simple eyes at the top, etc., etc. So there's no sequence in there that makes any sense. So that was the first tactic from an evolutionary point to say that. So now what can evolutionists do? Tactic number 2. Let's tactic number 2. The eye, if you take the retina, you see that there are a bunch of different types of cells. But the light comes from here, and the cells that sense the light are at the back, and there's a bunch of stuff before. So they say, this is amazing. Evolutionist says that the eye is the result of evolution because it's imperfect. It's imperfect. What we saw before, it's an imperfect design. Why? Because the light-sensitive cells, the cones and the rods, are pointing in the opposite direction than in the eye. And in fact, the scientists have studied the eye in great detail. And since the light-sensitive cells have a high metabolism, they need a lot of blood. If they were at the front, we would be almost blind because the blood would cover the image. So it is on the back to allow all the flow of the blood that need to nourish those cells to be seeing. So bad luck. So they third tactic of an evolutionist. In 1851, there's a German, Heinrich Müller, that found that there are some cells that are at the beginning, that they are now called Müller cells. And those cells, they help a lot to see so well. So the vision is so good because the Müller cells make some waveguide thing that helps to see well. So the revolutionists came up and they wrote that they claimed that this confirms the eye was imperfect, and evolution added the Müller cells, making the eye perfect for vision. So the problem is that there is no evidence of any eye without the Müller cell. So it's just another story. So it's unbelievable how you see, you need to go into the details to try to find out where the sheker lies. Okay, let's switch gear. Let's go now to an example, interesting example, the butterfly, right? Now we are changing topics and we're leading to the final part of this talk. Let's say, so the butterfly deposits something like hundreds or thousands of eggs on leaves of a certain tree that they like. Those are the little tiny eggs. But many of them will not make it. And what happens is that at some point those eggs hatch and there will be the kind of a worm-like creature that comes out, very, very, very hungry. So hungry that starts eating the egg. And after it eats the egg, starts eating the leaf where the egg was positioned. And then starts eating others. But in the meantime, it keeps on growing and changing skin. It changes skin and grows and grows and grows. And at some point, it has finished his life as a caterpillar. And it connects itself under a branch. It makes kind of a connection. And then it stays upside down. And it starts basically disintegrating himself, liquefying himself. So the whole thing is called the pupa or the chrysalis, and it gets a last skin change. But bottom line, what was going on in there, it's basically getting liquefied. And in fact, finally, it mimetizes with the branch. Amazingly enough, it takes the color of the branch, and then after that, you wait a few weeks, and then you have a butterfly that comes out. So we'll see now the butterfly coming out from this. And if you look at one of the pupa and you open it up, you see there is a green soup in there. This is what was before the butterfly. So let's summarize. Let's summarize. You have an animal that is alive. Yes, it's transformation number 1 into a liquid, which is apparently dead. There's no sign of life on that liquid. They studied it. In fact, I was once at a Shabbat with a girl that was doing a PhD on this. And I asked her, is it true that the pupa is dead? And she said yes.
The brain liquefies too?
Everything.
No brain, no nothing.
Nothing. Liquids. There are some structures in there, but nothing that's no life, no nothing. It's a soup.
Does it remember things?
Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Okay, and then you have the live animal that comes out. This is exactly what you're saying. There was a study that was amazing. They made a study. They took some of those caterpillars, right? When they were caterpillars, and they passed a certain odor. And when they passed the odor, they gave a shock. Odor, shock. This is the Pavlov experiments, right? Odor, shock, odor, shock. Now the caterpillar was conditioned with the odor. So now they passed the odor and the caterpillar started trembling because knew that the shock was coming. Then it attached itself, transformed, butterfly came, they passed the odor and the butterfly shook. Which means that the conscience of the caterpillar went into the butterfly, passing from the liquid dead state. So 2 questions here. How the chrysalis knows to change the color to mimic the branch that it is attached to? And second question, how can we explain that the butterfly remembers the experience it has as a caterpillar? How can we do this? This is fact documented. So now that we have seen on the animal, let's go to the hard subject that is on everybody's mind. And at least this will come to the point that is relevant to us. No, we're not so much interested in butterflies, but on ourselves. So this is an example of resurrection of the dead. Is there life after this life? This is a big question, right? And bothers a lot of people. So there are many things that are interesting. For example, some people come out with individual talents. You know, there are some people, I remember a friend of mine in Boston, he had a son, and his son was average kid, but he knew how to play piano like a pro, and he didn't take a single lesson. How is it possible? Sometimes everybody knows, you know, sometimes he's born, when he's born, this guy is good in math, this guy is good in languages, this guy is good in literature, right? So it's possible that everybody comes with certain things. So you may wonder, or there was the famous story of the kid that you said a pasuk on anything on Tanakh, Gemara, or he was repeating the pasuk. So there's something went wrong in the hitting of the mouth before he came out. But this is not scientific. Didier Savant is the famous, Didier Savant is the example I gave before. Someone who basically is a normal everything, but, you know, has an amazing talent for something. I remember I saw one of a guy who could remember numbers. No, he knew what he said? No, he knew all the phone book or something like this. Anyway, he can tell you the phone numbers of anybody on the phone book. So things like this. Or the déjà vu. Sometimes, you know, we have an experience and we say, I've been here before. You feel like you lived this thing before, but you didn't. But all this is not scientific. Or you have people with inborn phobias. How come? You know, I don't know. Ladies usually they're phobias of cockroaches, for example, or whatever it is. So, but all those are nice, but they're not fully scientific. All those indicators. But there are two scientific indicators, in my opinion. One of them, and this is what we're analyze today: regression under hypnosis and clinical death. So we're going to see examples of these two. And both are supported by thousands and thousands of testimonies, recorded, scientifically recorded. There's a lot of information there. It's not just one thing out there. Of course, I will not give you thousands, I'll give you one or two examples. And what is scientific in there? In all these cases, they reveal information that could not have been possible to reveal just based on current physical understanding. So, for example, if someone under hypnosis is telling you something that will prove true later, that shows you something. If you have someone that is clinically dead and can see what's going on in another country or in another room, that's something that is scientifically interesting. Okay, let's see those examples. Regression under hypnosis. The patients basically, with hypnosis, you can regress people to previous times. So they can even be regressed to previous lives. And in fact, during those sessions, many spoke foreign languages, antique dialects, or even dead languages. There are cases where they had to call an expert and say, what the heck is he talking about? And they say, oh, this is a language that disappeared in the 1600s or something, whatever. Or we'll see some examples. Many have revealed facts that could have been known only by historians or that were revealed through some time after the session. Example, Glenn Ford. Glenn Ford is a famous American actor, and he was interviewed by a team at UCLA on those sessions. So on the third sessions, he started speaking with a Scottish accent, and he said that he was a guy called John Stewart. He lived in the 18th century in Elgin in Scotland. He taught music and had stables with horses, and basically died young in 1812 at 32 and was buried in the Elgin cemetery close to the Baker family. And after the session, they asked Glenn Ford about this, and he said, you know, the Scottish accent doesn't surprise me because I know how to do accents. But music, and he said, okay, can you please play music? And he started playing music, and that was a thing, he never played music before. He started playing Chopin and other things like this. This is ridiculous, something special. And they checked the facts. They went to Elgin, they checked the cemetery, they checked the days, they checked the stones, and everybody he said was correct. Everything he said was correct. On the fourth session, he had one life that he could not reveal. He said it was black. He didn't want to say what it is. And then he went back one life before, and he said he was a French guy called Lanvaux. He spoke with a Parisian dialect of 17th century. I don't know who can do this. I mean, I would have liked him under hypnosis to explain to me some of the Rashis, because probably that would have really helped. And he said he was responsible of the stable in Versailles, which was on the left side, and that he died in a duel in 1684. So the story was that historical records indicated that there was a certain L'Envol that died in a duel and was responsible for the stables. But the problem was that the stables, all the books said they were on the right side. He said they were on the left side. So when they investigated further, they found an old manuscript in a museum in Paris, and initially they were on the left side. So you tell me how something like this can be done. Another example is a lady called Jane Evans that was interviewed by the BBC by a famous hypnotherapist. And basically she said that in her past, one of her past lives, she was called Rebecca. She was a Jewish woman living in York in England, at the end of the 12th century. And she was married to a rich guy called Joseph, a moneylender, Jewish moneylender, right? We find this in history. And she describes the persecutions by the Christians and that the Jews were forced to wear a badge. And during the York massacre, she took refuge with her husband and children in a crypt in a church. Crypt means a kind of, I think in an under basement something. But she was found and they killed her. That was the story. They called a professor that is an expert of Jewish history of York, and he said that all the details were amazingly correct, except for two. Number one, the church in Rome decreed that badges should be worn only in the 13th century, and she said in the 12th century she was forced to wear a badge, which was before the time of the Gezerah. And the church that she mentioned was one of them that was known, St. Mary's Castlegate, but this church doesn't have any crypt. Like any church in the region, they don't have crypts. So there were two things that were not right. They made further studies and they found out that England started practicing the badge in the 12th century, before the church imposed it. So, and the second thing was, many months later they were doing some renovation in the church and they found the crypt under the pavement. And that was an exception compared to all the churches that were in the region. So you tell me, how is it possible that things like this could be? This is scientific data like this. Clinical death, the second example. Clinical death is defined as the cessation of breathing and heartbeat and absence of consciousness. And it's a phenomenon that tens of thousands of people have experienced, and I guess that there may be even people in this room who have experienced that. There were people who made thousands and thousands of interviews and wrote different books. The most famous is Raymond Moody, Life After Life. Eben Alexander was a neurosurgeon that he himself had an aneurysm, and he, from atheist, became a believer. That's what usually, but often happens, things like this. And the common aspects to most clinical death experiences are the following. They feel floating outside the body and seeing what's happening to one's own body. They move through a tunnel. They see a big bright light. They have a feeling of serenity that is difficult to describe. They have a life assessment, a video of the whole life going out fast, or they have a panoramic memory, and they meet usually deceased family members. And sometimes they're even judged by a heavenly tribunal, sometimes with terrible suffering. And then they receive the order to come back to this life, and they return. So, in fact, two examples. I heard once of a story of a lady who had this, a Jewish lady, not religious, and then she started doing tshuva. And one day she was invited at someone for Shabbat, and she comes in and she faints. They says, "What's going on? Who is this guy on the painting? Who is on the painting?" It says, "The Ben Ish Chai." He says, "He's the one who judged me and told me to come back." Things of this kind. And I heard same story. Someone said Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. Different case. And if you want one that is an amazing thing, but it takes 2 hours to listen, is Rav Alon Anava. Alon Anava is a Rav in Tzfat, and when you see his picture before Teshuvah, well, he had half of his body with tattoos, earrings, etc. You don't want to meet a guy like this in the street at night. And he said that he was with his girlfriend in a taxi, and after some, I don't know, alcohol or drugs or whatever he had done, and then basically he saw himself, he discovered secrets of he said he went up, and the judges said, "You have 3 things to do, you have to come back, and those are the 3 conditions." He said it was an excruciating experience, and then he came back, and once I was in Sfat, I saw him walking white, like the Kabbalists, just white on Shabbat. Anyway, so this is one example. So the scientific element here is that many descriptions report data that could not have been known by the patient and given his location and status. Often they describe things that happened in the other room. They said, you know, I saw my mother crying in the other room, so I had to come back, or things of this kind. So let's have a look at one example. Pam Reynolds. This is a scientifically documented thing, and I'll tell you why. You'll understand why. Most scientifically documented example of clinical death. So this lady in her mid-30s, Lo Aleinu, had a huge aneurysm in her brain, considered inoperable. So aneurysm means you have one of those 100,000 kilometers of vein, arteries, and capillaries of our own human body, which is 2.5 times circumference of the Earth, that had a blockage of something like a few millimeters. Okay? So this is to tell you when we say Asher Yatzar, thank you Hashem that what's open should be open is open, what should be closed is closed, because this should have been open and was not open, and look at what happened to the poor lady. This is, but there was one surgeon, neurosurgeon Dr. Robert Spetzler, an expert on this, and he said he proposed her a radical operation. What's the operation? Cool the body to 10 degrees for 30 minutes to completely empty the artery of blood, disassemble it and rebuild it. So basically empty completely the brain of blood at cool temperature, and then do things, and then reheat it and hope she comes back to life. So after that, restart the heart, warm the body, and hope she comes back to life. Basically a programmed death, right? That's what they had, death for 30 minutes, hoping that it would work. But that was the only choice, given what she had. There was no way they could operate without doing this thing.
How long was she given?
Sorry?
How long was she given to live?
Finished. She was about to finish. Okay. And basically,
Before they did this, before they did the 10, they changed it to 10 weeks, right?
this was the proposal. She was there, sick. They said, lady, my friend, you have 1 week to live. You choose this, or we prepare the grave. That's okay. So she decided to do it, right? Okay. So basically, they killed her. She had no brain function. They proved her body temperature was low enough that she could survive without any brain function. And they put also on the ears some things that made noise that she couldn't hear what was going on in the operating room. And the surgery was successful. That was in 1991. And she died a few years ago of heart failure. She reported that she felt a pop and was outside her body, floating from the ceiling of the operating room, seeing the entire operation and all that the surgeons were doing, and listening to all conversations. She described in great detail. She said the colors were beautiful and so on. She also she saw the tunnel, she went into the tunnel, and on the other side there was this incredibly beautiful world. She met her grandmother and her uncle, who had been dead for several years, conversed with them. They were happy to see her, but they told her, it's not your time, you have to go back home. And she didn't want to leave, but she had to return. And she said it was like jumping in a frozen swimming pool, because in fact her body was at 10 degrees, right? So, and she survived, and she wrote a book about it. She lived to be 60, dying only a few years ago. So bottom line, this is extremely, and she, after the operation, she described in detail what the surgeons were doing, what the name of the instruments were, what happens, and what this one did this, and this one did that, and this one did this. And remember, she had things on the ear, she could not hear what was going on, and at the same time, of course, the brain was emptied. So this is, I'm one of the most amazing, the scientific insight is a description of what happened with brain drained from blood, meaning no brain activity. And she was in there. In fact, it makes me think something beautiful I read recently. There is a book of Rav Aryeh Kaplan Zatzal called If I Were God. And it's an amazing little book. And in there, he said something, who are we? So he said, who are we? We point this out. Are you the body? Are you the heart? Oh, we can put an artificial heart. Are you the brain? So he said, imagine that we take another body and we take your brain and put it on the other body. So who's who? Right? Are you the brain? And said, let's do a third experiment. Let's take you and another dead body, and let's transfer all the information, perceptions, emotions, feelings from your brain to that other dead body. Who is that one? So in fact, basically, we are a neshama. We're not a body, we're a neshama. Right? We said that last time. We're a spiritual being living a physical existence. So anyway, let's see a second example. This guy you may know, Yossi Sarid. Yossi Sarid was a member of the Knesset from 73 to 2006. He was the chief of Meretz. Meretz is the extreme left. From 93 to 2006. Known for his virulent and staunch atheism. So I want you, so basically, and in an interview on December 29, 2013, which was less than 2 years before his death, he surprised many Israelis when he told an army reviewer, an army radio interviewer, that he had once suffered death and has seen his soul ascend to heaven. So I hope this will work, because this is where I want to, is it correct connected? I will pass the original in Hebrew, and I will scroll the text in here, and when it's finished, the whole text, I condensate it in 3 minutes. After that, we're going to talk in English. Is good? Maximum.
פעם הייתי מת, כן, מתי. ואני זוכר זה היה כשנסענו כל המשפחה במכונית, ואני זוכר את הילדים שלי האומללים יושבים מאחור ובוכים על אביהם שנסתלק.
אני לא מאמין לך.
כן, לא.
אתם באוטו בשלב הזה?
נסענו באוטו, ופתאום הרגשתי חולשת דעת, והרגשתי פרץ חום עצום, ופתאום הרגשתי שאני מתחומם, מתעופף מעלה. כן. והרגשתי תחושה מאוד עמוקה של יציאת הנשמה.
רגע, אתה רוצה להגיד לי? זאת אומרת, הצלחת להרגיש הפרדה בין נשמה לגוף?
כן, והרגשתי תחושה של יציאת הנשמה, וכנשמה מעופפת התבוננתי על פני הכדור, ואז ראיתי את משפחתי שממשיכה לנסוע באוטו, כי אשתי שמה את פעמיה לבית החולים תכף ומיד, ולשם הגענו בסופו של דבר.
ואתה רואה אותם בזמן הזה, אתה רואה אותם מלמעלה?
מלמעלה.
כמו בסרטים?
אני לא יודע, בסרטים.
זאת אומרת,
בסרט הזה אולי לא הייתי. לא,
כמו בסרטים במובן הזה?
כן, לא.
שיש איזושהי ישות שנפרדת שהיא הנשמה שלך?
נכון, אתה מדייק. הנשמה, הנפש נפרדת מהגוף. בין הגוף לבין הנפש.
תשמע.
שלפעמים אולי היא רוצה לצאת, היא רוצה להשתחרר, שמע, גם היא רוצה קצת חופש.
בטח.
היא רוצה להתבונן על דברים אחרים.
בטח. איך אפשר להאשים אותה?
מתוך הכלוב הפנימי הזה.
כן. יוסי סרית,
אני לא כל כך מאמין באלוהים.
מעניין, זאת פגישה יוסי ש...
אין לזה שום, מה שחוויתי, אין שום קשר רליגיוזי. נגדיר את זה כך.
אני לא מקבל את הטענה שלך, ואנחנו לא נתווכח על זה, אני חושב מתישהו, כי חייב להיות קשר...
לא חייב
להיות.
תראה. אדם לרשות את עצמו.
לא, ברור, אבל...
אדם לרשות את עצמו, הוא חי, בתוך עצמו הוא חי, ברשות עצמו הוא חי, הוא אדם אוטונומי.
כן, אבל האתאיסט הקלאסי הוא...
בלי שום השגחה עליונה, אלא עם השגחה פנימית, רצוי מאוד שתהיה השגחה פנימית. בכל החוויה הזאת נתמצתה ביני לבין עצמי, ואין לה שום קשר לא לאלוהות ולא לאבינו שבשמיים ולא להשגחה עליונה.
אולי לא במובן הקלאסי של דת, אבל האדם האתאיסט הנורמטיבי, נגיד ככה, הוא חושב בכלל שהנפש והגוף.
אוקיי.
גם הנפש איננו.
גם אני חושב, אבל מה שקרה לי לא עולה בקנה אחד עם
מה שאתה חושב.
עם האני מאמין שלי.
כן, זה מה שאני אומר.
עם תפיסת העולם שלי. גם במובן של העולם הזה וגם במובן של העולם הבא.
בגלל זה העדות שלך היא המשכנעת ביותר ששמעתי, כי אני מהיכרותי עם דעותיך לאורך כל כך הרבה שנים, אני מבין כמה זה...
אוקיי, קח לך את...
So bottom line, he himself, he says the neshama detached. I saw myself. It was amazing to be out of the body. And they said, hold on a second, but you believe the body and the neshama is the same thing. One dies, the other one dies. He says, that's my ideology. And by the way, this one happens to me. Don't think there is anything to do with HaKadosh Baruch Hu or anything like this. Don't make this mistake. It's an illusion, right? Like same as the previous guys. And in fact, I asked one rabbi about this, and he said he referred me to a Gemara in Eruvin that says the Reshaim at the doors of Gehinnom. They feel the heat, they don't do tshuva. So it's amazing. This guy lived an experience that should have, and by the way, Sarid means survivor, I understand in Hebrew, right? So he's a survivor, and it's... I don't know. Okay. So anyway, so this is an amazing example, by the way, when you have someone like this that says this, you have an experience of a soul detaching from the body, declared by an ultra-atheist, that's fine. It will stop. So this is the best proof. When you have, so you don't have a rabbi saying this. You have someone who is exactly on the other spectrum that says this. Okay, so bottom line, this was what I want to share. I made a couple of advertisements. I would appreciate if you can fill the sheets in there and tell me if you are interested in receiving emails when we have other events like this. Please put your name and your email. If you speak French, there are many videos on different topics that are very interesting, especially for, they use it in French school, in some Jewish French schools to teach some science. And I did many of these conferences before, but of course, if you know places that would benefit from this, I would be interested in presenting. I'm not doing it for money. I also publish a few things, mostly in French, but important people like my videos. So just okay. So let's go back. Give me just 3 minutes. Netanyahu.
Now, but you can't just say that give us a teaser like that. What is that? I was a joke.
The joke. Okay, give me just 2 minutes. Give me just 2 minutes. We're done. I want you to read this sentence again. Nature, the modest veil of protection that God spreads over man so as not to force him to believe in God. After all we have seen. And what we have seen the scenic route, we have seen the number of stars, we have seen the lunar cycle, and the Gemara beats the NASA on both counts. And then we have the highway. We saw the Namibian desert beetle with basically no water. He drinks. We have the Tamar wallaby with the 2 different types of milk on the 2 different breasts. We have the 100% efficient light of the firefly. We saw the amazing 10 to the power of 20 processes that go on in our body every second, more than the number of grains of sand in Earth. We saw the complexity of the eye and how the evolutionists try to make something out of it. We saw the resurrection of the butterfly from caterpillar to butterfly with keeping the consciousness of when it was a caterpillar. We saw examples of regression under hypnosis with Glenn Ford and others. And we saw testimonials of clinical death from Yossi Sarid and others. So I think this is enough for us to say, well, I think I should get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in fact, the key message that we see when we see planning, structured complexity, perfect functionality, synchrony between complex systems, beauty in all aspects of creation, we understand that we can only say Marabuma Asecha Hashem, and thank Hashem for this beautiful world. And I understand for women, Imel Hashem will be the same presentation next Motzei Shabbat Noach, but at 9 p.m. here. And now, like Victor Miller used to say, questions on any subject, but I put with no guarantee that I can answer, and there is an email that you can email me if you have any question, want something, and there is a little small WhatsApp group that I put some things that are interesting in there. If you are interested, send me a message to this one. Toda Rabba. Thank you. Okay.
I have a simple question.
Yes.
Not understood properly, but what is the difference between a star and a planet? And I'd also like to add to that, how do we explain the fact that in Gemara, in our beliefs, we refer to only 7 planets in existence? Could you please answer those questions?
No, I cannot answer that question. I don't know well, we say planets, we have our planets that revolve around the sun. We call them planets. The rest we call stars. There is a certain definition of planets that it has to what?
Planet means wanderer. That which wanders.
Which wanders?
Wanders, that moves places.
Okay.
That's why it's called Kochalechet in the Hebrew.
But the point is they revolve. For example, there was a story of Pluto. Pluto was at a certain point a planet, then it's not a planet anymore because there is a criteria that it doesn't satisfy for the planet, but I don't remember exactly what criteria it is. So, other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Rav Daphne.
This idea of the phenomenon that you showed,
Yes.
those two people all those years ago, why is the more recent? I'm saying this is like people.
You talk about Sarid and company,
Yeah,
this guy?
There's this hypnosis that happens to people.
No, there are plenty, but I tried to choose two examples that I thought were very if you go and you can look in the literature, on the psychology papers, you can find plenty of examples of this, or on the books that have been written on clinical death, you have probably more recent examples. But the one of Pam Reynolds is amazing because it's absolutely documented from beginning to end with precision, because that was a one-of-a-kind kind of surgery at the time. So there's no Baba Mai said that someone invented the story. It was recorded from beginning to end with extreme precision. It was.
You're familiar with Sarah Yocheved Rigler's recent book, I've Been Here Before?
No.
It's a whole documentation of dozens of cases. It was put out just like last 5 years.
Okay.
You can easily order it at Judaica or
Here we go.
At Judaica store down in Carcass, where I picked it up. It's dozens of cases of people who through phobias, flashbacks, deja vus.
Okay.
There are things went through the Holocaust. It
Okay.
includes Goyim, who found out, had all these dreams, and then later on found out that wait a minute, they had been Jews who had gone through the Holocaust.
Fine.
It's really incredible. It's
Sarah, you have it legal. Okay, great.
Sarah Yocheved Rigler, yes.
Have the answer. What was the question? Speak louder, please.
I always had this question because I've heard many of these stories about, life after death. And,
Yeah.
and even Anaba, I've seen a lot of
Yes,
stuff
yes.
that he says, and he compares his experience to that of many other people.
Yes.
The thing that I have a question is when all these goyim
Yes.
are going to Shamayim and
Yes.
see the whole experience and everything, you'd expect them to understand that, wait, there is one truth.
That's a great question. I understand.
Okay, they see. And
Yes. You have an answer for that?
I just want to add to it that there are people that come back and say this or Jesus or whatever.
That's right. I have a problem with this one too. That's one thing is that you're right. You're right. In those books they say those things. Yes. On this one yes. Some Christians say this. They say that they said. So this is the part that is.
It's weird because Yaakov Astor has a book called Soul Searching, where he goes through again Moody and Stevenson.
Yes.
These cases where he
No, they say this. They're correct.
But no, he includes the story of a Christian kid who was dead when he was a baby, and when he was a toddler.
Right.
And they took him to a Christmas.
Right.
He came back and he said, "Listen, that guy isn't God."
Right.
If you remember, seriously,
Okay.
those parents,
Okay.
that guy's not God. I'm sorry, I was up there.
Okay.
He's not God.
They can't say that this guy is Yoshke because technically they say how to describe him.
Right.
It's like how he's shown by the goyim, but no Jew at that time had hair like that. He had
Right.
nails or beard or something like that.
Right.
Nobody was allowed to have.
I don't know. I don't know.
So that's,
I don't know.
yeah. But
Yes. After we close the camera, I will tell you a joke. But
Have you written any books?
what?
Have you written any books?
No, I wrote articles, but I'm thinking about it. But
It's your first book, because I was thinking exactly your whole presentation tonight when I was learning Shabbatina about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And I made an updated version with every single thing that you presented tonight as an updated version, as a modern day version of Shabbatina to give, because the Chavis and the Babas doesn't give virtually any examples of what you're saying. There
Right.
needs to be a book today.
Okay.
It's solid, rock solid evidence for the generation.
see,
today.
if someone wants to,
You've got it.
I need some help for doing a lot of things in English and in Hebrew, even if it's another thing.
I want to show you.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go first. The questions. Other questions? Yes.
Familiar with, there's a Masorah heard, I don't know how widespread it is, that Goyim, when they die, that their souls actually go through, just as Jews go through Hebron, through the Mara
Okay.
Makala, that the Goyim go through the Great Pyramid. And, but the main thing is that there's a hefresh, there's a division between where the Jews go and where the Goyim go. We're on the whole, and so there seems to be an inconsistency where we see Jews coming back as Goyim and so on. Unless maybe it's a punishment, it's an onish, because there are neshamas everywhere, and Jews come back as stones and animals. So that's the only thing I can think of. Any ideas?
I don't have ideas. No, you're asking a religious question, so I'm staying on the science. Go on. Question.
What did you say about fossils?
Yes.
Fossils. You didn't mention them. What
yes.
Science finds bones.
That's right.
These bones that are like simpler and they get more complex and more complex.
That's not. First of all, there is Cambrian explosion that shows the simplest and complex at the same level. That's one thing. And the second thing is if you look at really fossils, you have to make. First of all, when you look in which condition is the fossil and what part of the fossil you have. There are things, for example, I understand from Lucy, we got only, what did we have? Tiny parts here and there, and we make a whole construction. I'll tell you one thing. I saw a book of my wife, a French book of science. It showed what Lucy was represented something like 15 years ago and what it is now. 15 years ago, it was more monkey-like. And what it is today is more human-like. The story is that when you have, even if you had the whole skeleton, the muscle, the way that you put the muscles in there, you can change completely the physiognomy to look more monkey-like or more human-like. So there is a lot of monkey business, let's say, going on the representation of what the fossils are. Second, what they don't tell you is how many pieces you found. Sometimes they found the tooth, and they make a whole story of what the animal was. And this is sheker gamur. This is all based, and sometimes I saw videos, they say, we have 3 hypotheses. One of them is it's created, and then they go on the 3rd hypothesis, and well, how about the other 2? So they never tell you the hypothesis they make. So when you look at a scientific paper on paleontology or things like this, you need to look very, 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 very careful about the things. And of course, you know, if I told you that I found lower down a Chevrolet of 68, and then upper up Chevrolet of 74, and then upper up Chevrolet of 1980, it doesn't mean there was evolution. It was that there were 3 different creations. So the fact is that when you find fossils, there's not an inference, a me'achuz emet, that there was an evolution. Maybe there was 0 evolution. There were different creations at different times.
Dinosaurs?
I don't know dinosaurs, but I don't have a problem with dinosaurs. Avigdor Mirrors Zatzal doesn't have a problem with dinosaurs. So that's the only thing is if the dinosaur became a human, that's an issue. But that's not the case, right?
How reliable is carbon dating? Carbon dating.
Oh, that's a completely different story. So first of all, carbon dating makes a lot of assumptions on things. It makes assumptions that the rate was constant, and it makes assumption, for example, that there was a certain level to start with. If you change the assumption, the initial assumption, then the whole thing changes. And second, you can cheat carbon dating with some processes. You know, I read a story. I couldn't find again, but I saw other examples on the same line. Take a chicken from the supermarket, right? And carbonize it in an atmosphere of ethylene and other things at a certain temperature. And then bring it to the science and tell me, how old is it? They did this. Italian kids did this. They took a certain chicken. They did some thermal processes in the presence of certain gases containing carbon. And they brought it to the scientist and they said, tell me, what is this? Oh, yeah, it's a dodo 400,000 years ago. They said, sorry, we bought it at the supermarket 2 weeks ago. Well, so just... The dating is completely, so for example, we say a quantity of salt on the ocean, and because we assume there was no salt, and because of erosion of the rocks, you get the salt. Hold on a second, maybe Hashem created with the salt in there. No, it's not an assumption. So that's...
compared to the Darwin stuff, does it make more assumptions, less, or about the same?
Darwin is all assumptions. It's all extrapolations and assumptions all over the place. That's where you need to be careful. Because the microevolution he observes is correct. He observed is correct. The extrapolation he made are the ones where that he said it's obvious that you can extrapolate. That's not obvious at all. It's not obvious at all that you can extrapolate.
Well, I can't have the simple and the complex running simultaneously.
And they are. Cambrian explosion found complex and simple at the same level of fossils. Yes.
What about the argument that macroevolution?
That?
Macroevolution.
Yes.
Microevolution compiled into one thing until it's changed so much you can call it evolution.
No, because there are so many changes. So first of all, if you look at the epigenetics, you understand why some things can change in a certain individual or a certain species over time. But when you take a change from a fish to a lizard, transformation from a flap, to a leg, or you change from a leg to a wing. They said, it's impossible. It's new material, completely, and when you think about the intermediate hypothesis, it doesn't make any sense. So he says, in fact, I said last time, there's a stira mine ube in the evolution, meaning the survival of the fittest. The question is how the fittest came back. So survival of the fittest versus very slow evolution. So imagine a fish that has 1 foot. It's not the fittest. You need to wait for the 4 feet and for the whole thing to be a fittest. So either you say it changed completely from fish to lizard in 1 day, which has other problems, or you can the hypothesis of Darwin nobody holds anymore because it doesn't make any sense. I'll tell you even more. One question we discussed together is, let's even assume it's possible that there was 1 fish that became a lizard. Okay? Hold on a second. From my book, I know today there are people who are making new books, but my book says that you need a male and a female to have children, right? So the first one that transformed, let's say it's a male. So what you need a second miracle of a female at the same time, and they're at the same place, that they can mate together to do nothing. Come on, the whole thing is so nonsensical. And the probabilities, when you go into probabilities, you see that it's so ridiculous. So honestly, I think some scientists should be ashamed to say, yeah, there's a chance 1 in 10 to the power 48. Hold on a second. This is like I buy 1 ticket of the lottery in every country for 10 years in a row and I win all the lotteries. Right? If I said to you this, you would say impossible. But this one they publish. Why? I don't know.
Does anyone try to answer that up, or they just...
No, why to answer? The reason why they do it, I don't know if it's your question, the reason why they do it, Rav Elchanan Wasserman speaks clearly, is because, it's much easier to live without having to report to a God and do what I want. So if I can get God out of the picture, so to speak, and I can be, it's just evolution, things happen, abiogenesis, and there was no God into the whole story, then I can do every perversion that I want, and I don't have to give accounts to anybody. And I'm a free man. Right? He said, Atzmi. You heard what he said before. Atzmi, it's Atzmi, ani ve'atzmi.
Didn't Huxley or someone like him admit that the reason they ran after evolution is because they wanted to have a freer lifestyle? He admitted it.
Maybe. Okay. There are some. I know there is one who switched completely. One famous evolutionist that switched completely the other side, and of course that you don't hear much about it. I don't remember what his name is. I have to recheck.
Have you read Dr. Spetner's The Evolution Revolution from 2014?
No.
He brings all. I'll show it to you. It's
okay.
He brings all the. He brings all the evolution stuff.
Okay.
Is evolution necessarily kafira? We know there's the Ramban, there's Chomer Ayuli, and they're all built up.
I am a scientist, not a Rav. So you ask this question to your local Orthodox rabbi for this. I think that, there is so much compelling evidence out there. I showed you something like 6 or 7 examples in here. If you wanted to stay here until next week, we can dig other hundreds of examples. Wherever you look, you see chokhmah and bukets. It's unbelievable. And when you think about cycles, things that work together, I heard on a tape of a Rav of the Mir Yeshiva that he said in a Weizmann magazine of the Weizmann Institute, they talked about a certain animal, a certain tree that had certain fruits, that to pollinate needed a certain animal to take the pollen from another type of flowers and synchronize one on the other. So you have to synchronize the animal with the plant for this to work and so on. And one of the scientists heard this and he started crying. He says, you see the power of evolution? So, you tell me.
Fascinating. I wanted to ask another question as well. Something that's spoken about a great deal is this global warming business.
Yes.
as a scientist, what's your opinion? Is that science?
Okay, the story is, we are surrounded by fake news. And we don't know how fake or not fake are. They say that some levels of water are rising. There are some coastal lines that are getting eroded. And to tell you the truth, we have done things to the environment that are not so nice. I mean, we have polluted the environment like crazy. When you think about what happened in the last, I would not even say century, in the last 50 years, it's completely different than anything that we have done before. Think about this. One thing that is fascinating, when I was a kid, we said that there were almost 4 billion people on Earth. Today we're 8. I mean, and it's only, I'm not 200 years old, right? So the world is changing really fast. And today, who can live without 5 cars, right? And the Chat Pa'ami that at the end have to go on the environment and things like this. So that's, we are consuming a lot, we're producing a lot. So is it possible that we have done some damage to the environment? I think it's possible. I don't know exactly to which extent. I have a colleague of mine who's also, like on my research, looking money for producing alternative energies and stuff like that. And he has this chart where he shows the world, the temperatures moving from 1700 and green, blue, green, when he gets to today is red, flashy red, meaning so hot and so on. So just make the case dramatic. I think the Mabul Shel Shtut is much more dramatic than the global warming, in my opinion, but that's another story.
What about the Exxon Valdez oil spills and the like? What do they have damage?
But they do a lot of damage. But the question is, Akadosh Baruch Hu has made a big world, so that's on a localized things. I was not on that project. I don't know. Other questions? If not, we can shut off the camera.